All right, guys, let's have a honeybee class. Here is my first slide. I always start with this one. You're not going to need everything, but there are times when you may need something. That's how this equipment goes. You're going to want a bee suit. If you have a donkey and you carry things on a mountaintop, maybe you'll want a bee suit for him too. Honeybees. These are all honeybees. There are a bunch of different kinds. Apis mellifera right here is the one that we raise. They're all from Eurasia continent, so they are not native to the Americas. They were brought over here by the early settlers. They called them white man's fly, and so on. But they don't cause any damage or do any harm. They actually kind of help pollinate a lot of different things now. So these are the honeybees. There's a giant honeybees. There's a couple small island honeybees, and then there's a couple other different varieties. Yeah, they all have different proboscises and tongues and shapes and stuff like that. But letter A is the one that we raise. In the hive, they are a colony type of insect, and so there are three different kinds of bees in a hive. A lot of people know about the queen bee. The worker bee is the bee that has a stinger that stings you. It's also a female, so queens and workers are females, and then there's the male bee, the drone bee. Okay, they're different sizes. The queen's the biggest, drone second, and then there's the worker bee. Bees all start off as eggs. Okay, so eggs hatch into little larvae or little caterpillar-like critters, and during that time, those bees are fed, and then they cap this, and it spins like a little cocoon, and then out hatches the adult bee. So these honeybees do complete metamorphosis. When you inspect the comb, you'll see there are little larva chunks in there, and then there's eggs. And usually in the main section of the hive, that's what bees put there. Then usually in the outside, they'll put some pollen and some honey to feed those baby bees. That's typical for the bees there, and typically 94 degrees is the ideal temp for those little baby bees to develop. Queen bees are mature female bees. They've been fed a whole lot when they were larvae, and basically, when you do that to a female bee, she gets mature reproductive organs. Okay, and so the colony selects one queen, or the queen that hatches first actually kills all the other ones, and then takes over from the hive. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But they can lay up to 1,500 eggs daily. So that's a lot of eggs. That's more than the body weight, right? That's twice the body weight. And other bees help control this process by feeding the queen a certain amount of food. If they stop feeding her so much food, she slims down and doesn't lay as many eggs. If they feed her a lot, she keeps laying. That kind of thing. So here's the larva for the queen bee. Queen bees eat this white substance called royal jelly. Workers fill up their queen cups with this royal jelly, and then that's all they eat. The worker bees don't get all this royal jelly to eat. They get a little bit for the first 3 days, and then afterwards they're fed like pollen and honey and things. So that's the difference between making a worker female and a queen female, is just feeding them. Okay, queen cells are usually bigger cells, and that's when all these insects in here are triggered into making them for a swarm to form. Yeah, once these queens hatch, they kill the other queens. So what happens is when queens are made in a hive, it's usually at a time when the other current queen is about to leave. Okay, so the current queen is probably going to leave with a bunch of the workers, and then new queens are going to hatch. Whichever new queen hatches first, she kills the rest and then starts taking over. Queens take two flights. They'll take a swarm flight with half the bees to make a new colony and grow, more bees. That's how they naturally reproduce. Or when the new queen hatches out, she'll take a mating flight and mate with the drone bees. Here's the drone bee. He has the sting of love. right? So drone bees have unusually large eyes, and they kind of fly around in some weird zone in the sky called a drone congregation area, and then they look for queens and mate there. It's somewhere in the air, and I'm not sure how high up it is, but it's out in the air. They also just land around. They go in and out of the hive, look for queens. They just eat food. They don't do much. They're just big bees. Worker bees are the ones that don't have mature reproductive systems. They're 98% of the hive, and they're the ones that do all the work. Uh, Depends on when they hatch out and how old they are, what their general duties are. In general, when we're looking at bees and what they do and why, they're just kind of set. Each little bee in there is set for a certain kind of response, right? And here you can see those responses coming out, right? When they're first hatched, bees feed larvae. That's what they do, right? These bees build comb afterwards, and then they guard the hive. Then they forage for honey. Right? These are the normal things that they do at certain time spans in their life cycle. Right? And when we look at controlling bees, what we're trying to do is create the right response to the conditions we give them. This is where wax comes from. It's an abdomen secretion, and wax is basically a long carbohydrate chain, and certainly honey is full of carbs. And so when bees eat honey, they make the carbs and turn it into a chain, and there you got the wax. So if you're going to start bees, one thing you might want to do is make sure your town allows bees, and you don't get also you don't have to get rid of everything afterwards. You could register your hives with USDA. They do have inspectors that can come and look at your stuff. Also, you could claim hive failures with your USDA and get like compensation for hives that do that. It's kind of up to you on there if you want to register them. I don't, I'm neither way there. But if your bees aren't allowed in town, some neighbor's going to get all crazy. And I just want to make sure that you got that idea that you check for that. There is a lot of different expenses, right? And this is generally what I would see as the basics of your stuff. It depends on if you're building your home or you buy things, and generally, you can spend between $100 and $500 getting your bees, and it depends on how much you want to do. So let's have a look at where the bees live. Right, these are some natural locations, and you can see that they have a certain amount of spacing between their combs. All right. Down here it's dark. Right. Up here it's lighter. All right. So those are some natural patterns we have. Right. Here's some hippies making their sun hive with biodynamic energies and whatnots. This works. Right. It's a pretty cool looking hive, honestly. I mean, I love this landing thing. That's just amazing. I love that. And then here's a couple people that put boxes up here for the honey. They just take it out of the box. And this is some of that biodynamic stuff. It's like fancy organic agriculture. And, it'd be interesting to do, but honestly, you're not going to get a lot of honey out of a hive like this. So it's not so interesting. Here's the old fashioned one you see on the honey jars. It's called a skep, and that's how they used to raise bees. They put them on there, and then when it's time to get the honey out, they just put a stick in there and everything, just get it all out. Here's a bunch of old skeps. Sometimes they have observation hives. You can let them go in and out your house and watch them in the windows. That's fun. All right, here's what they do in Kenya. They just get a box and they put frames in. All right, frames in Kenya are just wood sticks. So what's the idea? How does this work in here? The only idea is the spacing, right? I showed you that spacing back here in the natural hives. They got spacing that bees follow, right? And the whole idea of any of these hives is to space the frames so that bees will put the comb on them, and then you can remove them, right? And that's what it looks like if you space them right in the Kenya hive. They got a bunch of sticks. They put them in there, and then you can get the hive out, right? And then awesome. Does that happen all the time? No, not all the time. But you can get them spaced right, and if you can get those bees to do it, that's what they're gonna do. Here's Tanzania. Oh, they just went with a square box, a little easier to make. Here's a barrel hive, same deal. Here's this thing. All right, you might have seen it. Like you twist something and it breaks all the combs in there, and honey comes out. They space the frames in there, and the frames have some kind of plastic part. Honestly, I just think this is going to get full of propolis, which is tree sap. The bees stick together. Breaking the comb over and over again is going to end up making a big mess in there. And then eventually, this is not going to pour honey out. After so long, it looks like a great commercial, but bees are going to fill that with goo, and then it's going to turn into a wax ball full of sticky sap and whatnot. Just go with the regular, I would say, right? And any of these could be your regular hive, however you want to go. But generally, this is what's normal, right? We got boxes, frames. The frames get spaced in the boxes, just like bees naturally build, right? And then they're just, you can take a box apart, and then you can look at different sections of comb. Okay, that's what we generally do. There's several companies that do this. Even at Rural King and PharmaFleet have hive bodies. Data and Walter Kelly are major ones that send catalogs out. There's also Labs and Brushy Mountain has some nice parts. Um, the boxes are different size depending on what you want to do. A lot of people use deep boxes for the bottoms for that's the place where most bees put their larvae. And they'll raise baby bees in the bottom, and typically honey will be put in the upper boxes. So they'll go to smaller boxes in the top because that's where bees naturally store their honey, and then they'll use the big boxes on the bottom. It doesn't matter what box you use because I mean, look at all this crap. People pick whatever they want and they raise bees in it. It really doesn't matter. Okay, so you could pick whatever you want, but this is easy to get stuff for, and it's pretty easy to build a box. I don't know about building those frames. It's like 60 cents a frame. It's a lot of low carbon on that wood. I would just buy them. These frames have grooves in them, and it depends on what you want to put in the groove. A lot of people put foundation in the grooves, and foundation is a sheet that has wax on it, and that guides the bees to build down there. Okay, so sometimes they'll on the top part there'll be a wedge where you can smash the sheet of wax in there and nail it, or some of them will just be a grooved one in there, so you kind of like put the sheet in sideways and pop it into the groove. The bottom one always just has a groove. There's no like other thing. There's a top groove here, and there's a bottom groove down here. Right, so you take your sheet and you slide it in there and pop it. There's also another option where you can just put something in there, or there's like a little pointy part on this top only, and it's called foundationless. Okay, so you could have a frame with no sheets in it, and the bees will build in it. I'll show you that later. The boxes. You can have big boxes with 10 frames, which is normal. Or if you're an old fogey or have a bad back, you can get 8 frames. Right? Because these get heavy. I mean, a full thing of honey and a deep could be 90 pounds. That thing could be up there. Now, a full medium could be 60, but if you go down to 8 frames, 45 pounds, they have to be full to weigh 60, though. So they're not always that heavy, but they can be. And you could also just say, all right, well, I want to put a smaller one up. Let me put a piece of wood here, right? Or maybe I just want to share it with 2 hives. Go ahead, right? Maybe I just want a real long one, and I'll do it back here. It's whatever you want to do, dude. Bees don't care. They just build the stuff and where you put them. Here are those sheets here when I was talking about the fit in those frames. Okay, so you could have this Duragil foundation, and there's a plastic sheet, and then it's sprayed with wax, and there's comb pattern on it. There's wired wax, so they embedded wires in the wax. And then there's these thicker plastic sheets, which have the pattern in the plastic, and then they spray wax on top of it. Or you could just do this. This looks like a piece of cardboard. Okay, so somebody slammed a piece of cardboard in there and the bees built it. Will the bees always do it that way? No, not always. But if you have the right spacing, they usually do. Sometimes when I do that, I'll do a sheet of this, or I'll do no foundation, and then I'll put this every other frame with a sheet of other foundation. So there's one in between empty and one in between with a sheet in it. They usually make sure that they do it real straight. So you could put a popsicle stick up there, and then they do that, right? As long as they're spaced well, they will do that for you. Some people also don't want a bottom entrance. They just put it on the top entrance. Doesn't matter. They need a place to go in and out. Sometimes I'll just put like a little stick in between two boxes, and that'll be their entrance. They don't care, right? So they don't care where it's at. All right, what about some of these other things? Gloves. Well, you can wear gloves when they're hot. I think that's a good idea. I would get those really thick, I think they're called nitrile gloves. They're black gloves. You use them for anhydrous ammonia on your tractor. They're big, they're kind of rubbery. Those things are the best. These leather gloves, they'll sting through those. You'll need a smoker. This is a nice smoker. It's a Daden smoker, looks like. That's a pretty good one. All right. You'll need supers. You'll need frames. The hive tool is super important, right? So let's have a look at hive tools. Bees use tree sap and other sticky substances to stick the boxes together. Okay, and when you got like a heavy box and it's smushed on there and there's bees in there, you're gonna want to crack it with one of these hive tools. Doesn't matter which one you pick. I think these ones right here are cheapest. There's also frame grips, so you can grip the frames. Those aren't so necessary. I can just grab the frames myself. I'll loosen up with a hive tool and just pull it up. But you might want those. Those aren't bad. I kind of like those. Smokers, you want a good smoker? You might want to just get the big smoker, and because if you buy the little one, you always wonder if the big one would have been better, right? So maybe you want to do that. I'd suggest I would get the one with the wires around it and the little hanger. Go out and get a nice smoker. What does smoke do for bees? Here's what it does. Bees communicate with scents and chemical signals sometimes. If a bee stings you, he'll leave a chemical there. And then you reach back in, he'll sting again. Another bee will sting again right there. Right? And so one way to get rid of that scent is to smoke it. You put smoke on the sting, they don't find it again. They don't sting you there. But also when they get alarmed because something's attacking their hive, uh, they release something into the air, and all the bees smell it and wafts through the hive. And if you put smoke in there, it covers it all up, and they don't know what's going on. Also, hives are made of wax and flammable things, right? So, as an insurance precaution, when smoke goes in the hive, bees kind of eat a little extra honey in case they might need to leave, right? So they're starting to eat honey. They're full. They're not receiving that upset signal by the pheromones, right? And so this kind of calms them down. It's also a way to move bees off of things. Bee suits. I recommend just getting the jacket. Okay, so get the jacket with the veil. When you get a bee suit, make sure that it includes the veil, the head part with the jacket. Sometimes they just sell the jacket and the head comes separate because people get a hole in their jacket and they want to replace it. So make sure they do that. Yeah, here's the natural one. You just cover yourself with all that. Or here's the real natural one, the bee suit there. They sell kids suits. You can get those. I just had my kids wear the smaller suits, and they just alarms flop around on them. It doesn't seem to bother them. Here's the glove right here. Get that big, nice black glove. That's the one. They can't sting through that usually. Um, Another thing you would want to do is to move bees off of the frames when you pick them up. I use a paintbrush or a feather. You can flick them off real easy. One thing that I would not get is this queen excluder. This is one that you can like try to keep the queen out of sections. It's a waste of time. It doesn't work. This one I'll show you a little bit later. This is a way to get bees out of a hive to get your honey. Here's what normally people get bees in the mail or they pick up bees. It's called a package bees. Package comes with about 10,000 bees and a queen. Okay, and basically what they did is they just stuck a queen in there and shook a bunch of bees and made an artificial swarm. In the package, there is a jar full of sugar water to feed them. And the queen is caged up because they just shook a bunch of bees on there. They didn't get to know her until they shipped this package. And then over the couple of days while the bees are in here, they kind of get to know and accept the new queen. So when you get a package, it's all sealed up and you got to crack the top, pull the can out, take the queen out, and usually there's a cork in here. So I usually get like a nail or a screw and I'll take the cork out and then I'll put the queen in the hive and then I'll shake all the bees on it. Then you put the lid on. That's how you put a package in. Swarms are awesome. You can catch one. You just put a box out. I usually take a few frames out and shake them in. Right? Swarms are the natural way they reproduce. When a hive gets really full of bees, the queen runs out of places to lay, and then the bees start looking for a new place to go. The old queen will fly off with half the bees right after she lays a few young eggs somewhere in the hive, right? And then those bees will feed those eggs really well and make new queens. The old queen and half the rest of the bees have left and gone to find somewhere else. When you manage your hive, one of the things you'll have to do after your first year is to kind of make sure the bees kind of think they're not full on their space. The first year, you don't have to worry about these things. First year, you won't have to worry about swarms and your bees swarming out of there. You're just going to fill it up. But the next year, when there's a lot of bees in there in the spring, you might want to put a bunch of empty frames in so that they don't think that they ran out of space yet. You know, that kind of stuff. You can trap swarms pretty easily. I just put boxes out with honey in there and old comb with honey and a little lemongrass. And I've had bees move right in. Some people hang them in trees. I've caught bees with old dresser drawers with a piece of comb in it. They sell swarm traps, but I think that's a waste. You might as well just buy a box and put some old comb in it. Right? Right. You know where honey comes from, I hope. Hopefully you realize it's tree sap, or sorry, not tree sap, flower nectar, same thing, right? Photosynthesis makes sugars. Bees take this, bring it home, evaporate the water, and turns to honey, right? How do you get it out? You could buy an extractor. I haven't bought one yet, but you cut off all the ends of the caps of the comb, spin it, and then you got a big mess to clean up after you're done. You can also put little screens in there and collect pollen, right? So you can buy these little pollen inserts and bees walk over it and the pollen drips off their legs and harvest pollen. Pollen needs to be dried or frozen because it is part of a plant that will naturally grow and the moisture can get all moldy, nasty. So you'll have to deal with that. But you know, if you freeze it or dry it, you're fine. Here's what I do to get honey. I put one of those little triangle mazes on my hive, and the top box has honey in it. So if I put the little triangle maze slot, it's like a little piece of wood here, in between the honey and the rest of the bees, and it's a cooler night and they need to warm up, they'll leave the honey and go down with the rest of the bees, and then they can't figure their way back in. So that's one way to get the bees out of the box for honey collection. There are other ways. One involves spraying chemicals on a board similar to this, and then it pushes all the bees out. Right? It's called Bee Go or Bee Quick, and it will push them all out. Another one is some people use a leaf blower and they blow all the bees out with a leaf blower. It's a lot of work. I just get these bee escapes here. I think this one comes from Brushy Mountain, and it's a good bee escape. And you just put it in between this and the honey. On a cooler day, the bees will leave. If you do this in July or a real hot day, June, you might not want to do that because it might melt. Right? You want to get the bees to get the air currents in there. But in the fall, when it's cold, it works out really good. Then I take my honey and crush it in a bucket with cheesecloth. It filters out most of the wax, and then I got a little spigot, and then there you go. You got some honey coming out. All right. What do I do with a crushed comb? I put it in a bucket of water or in a pot of water. I melt it and keep an eye on it. Look what happened here. I melt it, and then I take the honey water and I make it into mead and honey whiskey and whatnot. And then I take the solid wax, put it in a coffee can, and I pour it through gossamer fabric, which is real thin, and it separates all the little cocoons and other junk in there. And then I got some nice beeswax. Right? Beeswax occurs in different colors depending on what seasons it's in. I dyed this beeswax here brown with walnut dye just to see what it do. I got a tutorial on that later. You can learn about it. Honey straws. Most people buy honey straws from their bee catalogs. It's a big fraud. But you could put your own honey into honey straws with one of those sealer things. I just wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot of work. All right, there's some bee biology stuff and other things. I'm going to kind of gloss over that. I do want to talk about the stinger, right? The stinger is a little sac. It comes out of the bee, it pumps in venom, right? So you want to get under and pull it out. You don't want to squeeze it and pinch it, squeeze all the juice into you, right? That's one thing you want to consider. Also, after it gets done, you want to smoke that area, right? The big bee suit is a white light color. If you think about some bears or other animals scratching upon, it's like the opposite, right? You want to slowly back away from bees when they're coming at you. You want to have slow movements, plenty of smoke to turn off that alarm pheromone, right? That kind of stuff. And, just don't panic. Right? If you have an allergic reaction, that's a whole nother story. You might want to have an EpiPen for those friends of yours that are allergic. What happens when you're allergic? Uh, your body has cells in it called mast cells and other recognizing cells that say, this isn't venom, this is a parasite. Right? So your immune system mistakes bee venom for actual miniature parasites. And so when the bee venom goes into your body, all these cells with the smallest amount of this think parasites are invading your body and it swells everything up. Right? So these cells release all these things, swell up your entire body. This drops your blood pressure, can clog up your airway and breathing passages, makes your heart race. It's a big mess. It's like it got stung all over your body because your body's a million times more sensitive to this venom than just getting stung and swelling up kind of thing. Right? There are cells all over your body. Sure, does this venom damage your cells and injure your tissue and swell you up? Of course it does. But not like an allergic reaction. That stuff goes everywhere in just the smallest, tiniest amounts set off a big reaction. So EpiPens, you just take all stuff off and jam it into the thigh, and then it gives them the shot and get them out to the hospital so they can get their more medication to reduce the inflammation. If you are alone, or if you don't got a suit on, bees are chasing you. What do you got to do? Go inside somewhere. Right? They use the sun to navigate. So get inside a house, a car, a porta potty, a tent. Get inside. Don't go underwater. They'll just wait for you to come back up. Get inside somewhere. That's what you got to do. Bees do have their own parasites and problems. One of them is tracheal mites. They have varroa mites, these little things lay eggs in there when they go in cocoons and then suck on the larvae, right? There are different methods to treat them, and we can get into that some other day. There's powdered sugar dusting is a pretty organic method to do. Some people formic acid or oxalic acid and smoke them off. They do test for the numbers of these before they treat them. There's little boards you can put on there and count them and see if you merit a treatment. Here's these moths. You store comb and stuff for a long period. Wax worms, lay things in there. I have a type of bacteria that I spray on most of my stuff, and that helps take care of all those the wax worms. It's called BT aswazi for that. Hive beetles. Oh, those suck. They lay these gross maggot things, and they'll eat through the hive, and they'll turn it into fermented, nasty taste and flavor. It's the worst. What do you do about all these things? You can treat for them all, but you can also try to limit the size of the space that bees have to defend and grow in, so it's not too big. You just add one box, and when there's 7 out of 10 frames full, then you add a second box. All right, now 7 out of 10 frames full, hit another box. And then when you go back down, there's some unfilled frames. Just move them into the middle, right? And then they'll fill up. And you just let one box at a time fill up, 70%, 80, 90% or so. And then you add the next box. That's how you keep most of these things at bay. And there are treatments for when it's an emergency, but generally speaking, you don't really want to do that kind of stuff. All right, well, that's probably enough for you today to digest beekeeping. All right, here's one of those sticky boards for Mike Counts, by the way. Let's see here. You'll probably want to go to bsource.com and look through these forums for a little while. There's all sorts of cool stuff on there. And then a guy named Michael Bush has a nice site, and he talks all sorts of stuff about beekeeping. I like his philosophy. All right, well, that's about it for today.